Do you know somebody who suffers from depression? Perhaps a loved one, a family member, a significant other, or a friend. If you truly care about them and their well-being and want to understand what they are going through, then this video is for you. The first step in helping them is to first understand what they are experiencing, which breeds empathy and sympathy, and hopefully positive action. If you are the one struggling with depression, then you may also find this video helpful because it will help you feel less alone. There are others who know what you are going through, and having this sense of community and understanding can help you in your darkest time. If you are at your lowest of lows, know that there are resources available to you right now that can help. Your life matters, and you as a unique being are needed in this world, even if you are struggling to see it at this moment. This video is not meant to treat mental illness or offer a cure. Please utilize all resources available to you, including the advice of health practitioners. This description of what it feels like to be depressed comes with years of experience into this mental illness, as well as direct experience having lived through it for 7 years. I truly know what it is like, and I want to do everything that I can to raise awareness for depression and to provide a beacon of light for anybody else who is suffering. The first thing to understand about depression is that there are two main types: situational and chronic or clinical depression. We all go through periods of depression from time to time. If one loses their job, their relationship, or suffers the loss of a loved one, we all experience a period of grieving and sadness. But this sadness tends to go away over a relatively short period of time before we are able to move forward and go back to experiencing joy in our life. But what differentiates situational depression from clinical depression is that clinical depression does not go away after a short period of time. It can linger for weeks, months, and even years. Somebody who suffers from clinical depression suffers more than general sadness or feelings of being blue. They are feeling perpetual torment on the inside. Thoughts and feelings of despair, hopelessness, and pointlessness are constantly nagging within your mind. And sometimes there does not need to be a reason for somebody being depressed. One could have a stable and meaningful job, a healthy relationship, hobbies, a house, and may not need to stress about paying bills, and they still suffer from chronic and persistent depression. Depression is not selective and sees no boundaries when it comes to one's ethnicity, physical location, or status. It is a monster that gives no mercy. To describe what it feels like, I'm going to provide to you a list of metaphors that will encourage you to practice as a mental exercise. Now, imagine that you have the flu. You have likely experienced the flu or some similar illness in your life before. You know what it feels like: the low energy, the moodiness, the foggy mind, the physical and mental discomfort. And it seems like it never goes away. It lingers to the point where you may even forget what it's like to feel normal. A depressed individual feels flu-like symptoms almost nonstop. On any given day, they will be confronted with the mental fog, the lack of energy and motivation, and the feeling of being constantly uncomfortable. On top of the flu, imagine that you are hungover at the same time. You must expend all of your time and energy in the morning just to reach an equilibrium so you can go about your day. Also imagine that you start seeing the world through black and white, much like a 50s film. All the vibrant colors you were used to experiencing are all clouded by a mist and darkened by a cloud that follows you everywhere. The average person who is not going through depression should typically wake up on any given day ready to take on the day with all of its challenges and opportunities for joy. But when you are depressed, it is difficult to see the joys of the world. A depressed individual's baseline feeling is one of being completely numb. Not only is it hard to experience joy, it is also difficult to feel other emotions such as sorrow. It is as if one is dead on the inside, a shell of one's former self. And the emotions that do bleed through are all of the negative variety: regret, guilt, shame, remorse, resentment, bitterness, anger, frustration, and even loneliness. These negative thoughts form a cycle within one's mind, all feeding one another and becoming stronger and stronger. Anybody who is addicted to something, whether it be alcohol, drugs, or even food, will understand these cycles. For a depressed person, it is common to be consumed by thoughts such as, I am worthless, I am a failure, there is no hope for me in being happy, everybody hates me, I am ugly, etc. The movie Groundhog Day is an excellent example of the cycles we all go through every single day. These thoughts are often provably untrue, even when a depressed person is validated by friends and family who do show them that they care about them. But when you are depressed, your mind convinces you that it is not true. These thoughts continue to circulate where one starts to feel guilty for being depressed and then feels guilty for feeling guilty. Imagine that. Depression feels like solitary confinement in the confines of one's own mind, and all you have to break out is a plastic spoon. The familiar room you are used to waking up in all of a sudden seems like a dark dungeon with no way out. It also feels like constantly being homesick, but not knowing where home is. Nothing feels right. It also feels like boredom, but not wanting to do anything. Wanting to be somewhere, but not wanting to go anywhere. And wanting to be alone, but then feeling too lonely. It is a sense of pointlessness, like one has lost the narrative of their own life. It is like having an anchor chained to your leg that pulls you deeper into the sea while you struggle to swim to the surface and stay afloat. This heavy, foreboding feeling will weigh you down at all points throughout the day, where you are sinking further and further into the abyss, reaching darker and darker levels. Depression is the feeling of perpetual discomfort. The uncomfortable physical sensation of having a thorn in one's thigh or sand in one's pants is the feeling a depressed person feels inside of their mind at all times. Before you know it, you are imagining ways to end your life wherever you go. You imagine hanging yourself from rope you see hanging somewhere. You imagine a car going off the road and hitting you. You imagine you will be the rare statistic that gets struck down by lightning. And you hope for it to happen because you don't want to suffer such pain anymore. For somebody who is depressed, sleep is usually the very best part of their day, as hard as that may be to sound. They may end up looking forward to the time when they can go to sleep instead of happily enjoying their day, because that is the only time when they can have a short reprieve from the perpetual thoughts and feelings of negativity. When they open their eyes in the morning, it is common to feel angry that they woke up and must confront another day in what seems like hell, the very definition of hell. It is also difficult for one to fall asleep because their brain is constantly running on hyperdrive, preventing them from finding a state of stillness. You will often hear a depressed person say, "I don't want to be here anymore." This is because they are tired of feeling the constant pain. When you are depressed for such a long period of time, it is difficult to remember what it is like to feel quote-unquote normal. The reason some end their lives is because they simply don't want to feel this pain anymore, and they just can't see a way out. People who cut themselves do so because 1, they want to feel something rather than nothing, and 2, they feel that physical pain takes away their attention from the chronic emotional, mental, and even spiritual anguish, even if it's for just a moment. It is truly tragic, and my heart goes out to all people who self-harm or reach any sort of breaking point. People who are depressed often get jealous of people who develop fatal illnesses such as cancer. This is not to make light of the situations of people who suffer from cancer, nor those who are directly impacted by a loved one who suffers from cancer. But when you are depressed, the thought of dying from an illness rather than one's own hand is very appealing, because not only do they think their pain will finally end through death, but they will lessen the impact of their death on loved ones. This is not true, but the depression does convince them so. One can also describe depression as living without guardrails. While most people seem to have functioning cars full of gas, driving down roads with guardrails to prevent them from falling and crashing, somebody who is depressed feels that they are pushing their broken down car without gas down a treacherous cliffside road at all times without guardrails. Even if they have a good day, or maybe even a good week, even the smallest of things can cause them to fall back down into the abyss. It is as if you are held together by rubber bands and paper clips, ready to fall apart at any moment. Another visual example is to imagine climbing a tree with all the branches breaking underneath your feet. A depressed individual often feels like they take one step forward only to take 2 steps back. All of the strength and energy they can muster to get better is quickly dissipated by the smallest of life challenges. Imagine if you were given the task of climbing a mountain using only your teeth while your legs and arms are tied up. And at the top of the mountain is a single dollar bill as a reward. That sounds crazy, right? Why would I put in all of this effort to climb this mountain for such little reward? This is what it feels like for a depressed person to simply get out of bed. The dollar bill as a reward can be equated to the chemicals dopamine and serotonin within our brains. These are the chemicals our brain produces to give us a sense of reward when we do something that is worthwhile to our well-being. When we engage in a hobby that brings us joy, when we clean our house, when we perform a task at work, to name a few examples. Our brains produce these chemicals to balance our neural connections, so we are encouraged to do these activities in the future. But when you are depressed, these chemicals are not produced in balance. This is why simply getting out of bed feels like climbing a mountain. What is the point? Is a common phrase depressed people use, which is understandable. Their brains are not giving them a normal sense of reward for otherwise simple tasks. Just like you might ask, what is the point in climbing a mountain using only your teeth for the reward of a single dollar bill? A depressed person feels this for all the basic tasks that we all take for granted. People who are depressed also expand their definition of what fine is to an unhealthy degree. For instance, when passing by another person, a healthy person would often respond to the question, "How are you?" with a reply of, "Fine," or "Okay." They may not be feeling immense sadness or a great amount of joy, but they are feeling somewhat neutral. A depressed person, however, may reply, "Fine," or "Okay," with feeling unbelievable torture on the inside, but at least they are not ready to thrust themselves out in the middle of traffic. It is like trying to laugh at a joke that isn't funny, or trying to smile for a photo you don't want to be in, but persistently so in all situations of a depressed person's life. Many depressed people often hide their feelings because of the stigma that is still attached to depression. They are worried they will be labeled as lazy, apathetic, or just looking for attention. Even if one finds the energy, motivation, and willpower to seek help to improve their condition, they still must confront the reality that help costs money. Therapists, psychiatrists, and medication all cost money, and when confronted with the possibility of going into debt or struggling to pay the bills when one is already depressed, only worsens the condition. Nobody should ever have to struggle in such a way. You also cannot equate getting help when you have the flu to getting help when you are depressed. When you are physically sick, of course the natural response would be to want to get better. But please understand, when you are depressed, there is such a lack of motivation, energy, and willpower associated with the invisible illness, coupled with a cloudy mind and constant ruminations of pointlessness and worthlessness, that makes finding help incredibly difficult. If you have ever played a video game before, you will know what it is like to not want to play anymore. And so you will either put it down for a few days or switch to a new game, or stop playing altogether indefinitely. But we cannot do so in the game called life. There is no reset button, and the only way out is death itself. When you are depressed, it feels like you are being forced to play a game that you just don't want to play anymore, but you have to. And when you are depressed, you're forced to trudge on throughout your life feeling this way, while all of your fellow humans are going about their days happily, enjoying their life, not having such mental issues. What I have just described to you is the absolute worst case scenario for what one feels when they are depressed. Everybody is different, and therefore will experience depression in different ways to different extremes. But one thing that is common is that depression is a tragic illness for anybody. Nobody should have to suffer in such a way. Nobody deserves such torment. Every single person deserves to experience joy and peace. So, if you have a loved one or a friend who you know who suffers from depression, I hope that this description helps you better understand what they are going through. Please know that this is a serious illness, and that positive thinking, diet, and exercise are often not enough for one to overcome clinical depression. It often takes years of therapy, self-work, and a plethora of coping strategies for one to regain control over their mental and emotional well-being. You can help them by doing your best to understand their pain and by showing them that you care. Further videos will detail solutions and coping mechanisms one can take to overcome depression. There is hope, and your life does matter. Thank you for listening, and I hope that you take your life one moment at a time and hang on there, my friend.